Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Why Scandinavian Cabins Stayed Warm at minus 30 Fahrenheit while Modern Homes Freeze. Well, I obviously do not know the answer, but I would assume that they know what they're doing because it's Scandinavia, and I know that they're pretty up north, so I don't know, they can handle cold, so I would trust them. I would absolutely trust them with keeping houses warm. So let's check it out and comment, like and subscribe. Okay. We're building it?
There is something fundamentally broken in the way we build today. In 1872, a survey was conducted on the Borgund Stave Church, a traditional wooden structure in Norway.
That's a
during
church?
one of the harshest winters in decades. Outside, the mercury had plunged to minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow lay several feet deep. The wind howled through the valley with enough force to shred a modern expedition tent.
That's
Yet
crazy.
inside this wooden church, built in 1180, with no HVAC system,
That's
no
insane.
fiberglass insulation, and no double-paned windows, the temperature held steady at 46 degrees Fahrenheit. There was
Oh.
no fire burning, no external energy source. The structure itself, built from solid wood using methods we've largely abandoned, kept the temperature stable.
Why did we abandon
Compare
them?
that to a modern American single-family home. Cut the heat when it's 14 degrees Fahrenheit outside.
And
Within
you're
6 hours, your indoor temperature drops below freezing.
You're gonna have a bad time.
After 12 hours, your pipes burst. After 24 hours, the house is uninhabitable. What did builders 800 years ago know that we have forgotten? In the mountainous regions of Scandinavia, hundreds of log cabins built between the 13th and 17th
What country is it exactly? Is it Norway, Finland? I always get them confused.
centuries are still standing. These structures have
Oh, really?
survived for centuries. They've endured winters that would
Wow.
rot a modern stick-built house in weeks. And they achieved this with
More shocking than the fact that they are keeping warm is the fact that those cabins are still standing after that many years in harsh weather. That's crazy to me.
three things that are completely ignored in our modern international building code: thermal mass, absolute airtightness, and a heating strategy based not on constant energy consumption, but on strategic heat storage. These three
Okay.
principles worked as a complete system. No single trick, no miracle product.
Yeah.
Just a physically sound concept that worked with nature, not
science.
against it. Today, we build against physics. We try to fight the cold with brute force energy, and we are losing.
Well, true.
Before we dive deeper, drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with a grid failure or blackout in winter? How long did your house stay warm? An hour? 6 hours? Or could you see your breath after 30 minutes? Let us know, because what you're about to learn will change how you look at every modern building. Let's rewind to 2010. A research team at the Norwegian University of Science and
Norway.
Technology ran an experiment. They took two identical structures, both roughly 430 square feet. The first was a reconstructed medieval log cabin built to 14th century specs.
Medieval.
Solid
Great.
logs, 12 inches in diameter, hand-hewn, joined with tongue and groove. No modern insulation, no vapor barrier,
Yeah.
no pink fiberglass. The second was a modern prefabricated house,
Oh, this is
built to current
gorgeous.
stringent energy standards. Double insulation, R value of 25, vapor barriers, triple glazed windows. On paper, the modern house was miles ahead of the medieval one.
Sure.
Both were placed in the same valley. Outside temperature, minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Both were heated to a comfortable 68 degrees. Then they cut the power. The modern house plummeted to 36 degrees Fahrenheit within 9 hours. The log cabin, after 48 hours, the inside temperature was still 54 degrees.
What?
After 72 hours, 3 full days without heat, it was still sitting at 43 degrees, well above freezing. The
What are we doing with our modern buildings? What?
modern house had become a life-threatening icebox,
Yeah.
while the medieval cabin remained survivable. Why? A modern civil engineer might say that's impossible.
Yes.
The R value of the log cabin is only around 10. The modern house boasts an R 25. A higher R value means better insulation, so the modern house should win. But
Technically.
R value only measures heat transfer in a steady state. It completely ignores thermal mass, and thermal mass is the game changer. A 12-inch thick
What is
log
that?
wall of old-growth pine weighs about 80 pounds per linear foot. Wood has a high specific heat capacity, meaning it can bank enormous amounts of energy. When the
Yeah.
cabin is heated, the wood absorbs that heat deep into its core. When the heat
Oh.
source stops, the wood slowly releases it back over hours and days. The modern house? The walls are a sandwich of
Yeah.
1/2-inch drywall, a plastic
No,
vapor
not
barrier,
wood.
fiberglass batting, and thin vinyl or wood siding.
That's crazy.
The whole assembly weighs maybe 10 pounds per linear foot. There is zero mass to store heat. The insulation
they're
slows
thin.
down the heat loss, but it stores nothing. As soon as the furnace quits, the heat in the air bleeds out through tiny leaks and thermal bridges. And because modern stick framing has no thermal mass, there is no reservoir to recharge the room.
This makes all the
Medieval
sense in the
builders
world.
understood this instinctively. They harvested trees that were at least 80 to 100 years old. Trees grow slowly in the frozen north. The growth rings are incredibly tight, often over 100 rings per inch. This makes the wood insanely dense and heavy. 1 cubic foot of old-growth pine weighs over 37 pounds. Modern plantation pine, maybe 28 pounds. That
they're
density is crucial.
They're very
More
thin.
mass means more storage. More storage means a longer thermal lag. It takes 12 to 18 hours for the outside cold to penetrate a 12-inch dense log wall. By then you've likely rebuilt your fire. The
Yeah.
cabin acts like a thermal battery, smoothing out the temperature spikes. But mass alone isn't enough. You need absolute airtightness. Here lies the second secret. Despite all our Tyvek wraps,
I think it's crazy that they were able to build this so tight, as in there's absolutely no spaces left.
flashing tapes,
I mean, way back
modern
in the day.
homes leak like sieves.
Yeah.
Blower door tests show that the average modern home has a cumulative leak
Yes.
equivalent to leaving a 20 by 20 inch window wide open.
They absolutely
That is
do.
not an exaggeration.
No,
Add
no.
up every gap around your outlets, baseboards and windows.
There's a lot of
That's
gaps.
the hole you're heating. When it's 5 below zero, cold air is pouring through that hole 24/7.
Sure.
Your furnace isn't fighting the walls, it's fighting an invisible open window. The log cabins didn't have this issue. The logs were
Everything's
joined using a
compact.
scribe fit technique. Each log was custom cut to mirror the shape of the one below it.
Oh,
This
it's
took
custom
weeks.
cut.
A single room could take months to frame,
That's crazy.
but the result was a wall with virtually zero airflow. Then came
And the fact that they're still standing after that many years, I think it's proof that it
the
works.
chinking. The gaps were packed with sphagnum moss from the bogs.
Oh, the
This moss
moss.
can absorb 20 times its weight in water.
Oh my god,
When
that's
dried and
crazy.
compressed, it expands into every microscopic crevice. Over that, they applied a daub of clay mixed with animal hair, usually sheep or goat. The clay dries hard,
What?
creating an airtight seal, while the hair acts like rebar to prevent cracking. It's
Okay,
a breathable
sure.
system. Vapor can escape, but drafts cannot enter.
So
When
crazy.
researchers
It's
test
animals.
these 600-year-old cabins today, many meet or exceed modern passive house airtightness standards.
That's what's
A
insane.
hut built with an axe and moss is tighter than a suburban home built with high-tech composites. The
My
third
mind cannot
element
comprehend
is the
this.
heating strategy. This is where it gets interesting. We tend to think of old cabins having open fireplaces, but open fireplaces are thermal disasters. They suck
Really?
massive amounts of warm indoor air and blast it up the chimney. A roaring open fire can actually make a house colder by creating negative pressure.
What?
Instead, the Scandinavians used masonry heaters, known as kakelung or soapstone stoves.
I've never
These
seen
are
this in my
massive
life.
units built of stone or brick weighing several tons. You burn a hot, fast fire once or twice a day. The combustion is complete and clean. But instead of the exhaust shooting straight out, it winds through a labyrinth of channels inside the stone mass. The gas transfers its heat to the stone before it ever reaches the chimney.
It keeps it
By
warmer.
the time the smoke exits, it's barely warm.
Yeah,
All that energy is trapped in the stone.
of course.
This stone mass then radiates heat gently for 12 to 18 hours.
I'm wondering if it would be the same if a chimney is made out of bricks, I think, right?
The surface stays at
Sort
around
of?
140 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to feel good, but safe to touch.
Oh, I've
You
seen
can lean
those.
against it. You
Yeah.
can sleep on it. The heat is radiant,
Yeah.
meaning it warms objects and people, not just the air.
Yeah.
Radiant heat creates comfort at lower air temperatures. You can feel cozy in 60-degree air if you are near a 160-degree stone wall. A modern forced air system has to pump the air to 72 degrees to give you the same feeling. That is a massive waste of energy.
Yeah, that's a lot.
A Finnish study from 2003 reconstructed a traditional smoke room, an early cabin style, and tested it at minus 13 degrees Fahrenheit. A single 2-hour fire using about 45 pounds of wood kept the interior above 59 degrees for over 16 hours.
Wow,
The
that's a
fuel
lot.
consumption was about 1/10 of what a modern home with an oil furnace would burn in the same period.
Yeah, sure.
And that's without
More
modern
efficient.
insulation. Just thermal mass, air tightness, and radiant heat. Interior design played a huge role too.
Everything's compact.
Scandinavian cabins didn't do open concept.
Yeah.
Modern open floor plans are a nightmare for efficiency. Warm air rises,
It's funny because it's the opposite of what's in fashion and what's trendy right now.
gets trapped in vaulted ceilings while your feet freeze.
Yeah.
Medieval cabins had low ceilings, often
Everything's
just 6.5 feet
tiny.
high. Rooms were small and compartmented by doors. This kept the heat where the people were. The central room for cooking and working was the warmest. Bedrooms were cooler, but that didn't matter because you slept under heavy wool and furs.
Ah.
This thermal zoning slashed heating needs. There was no need to keep the guest room at 70 degrees. We have completely forgotten this logic in our quest for massive great rooms.
It's true.
Then there's the foundation. Modern US homes are often built on slab-on-grade concrete. Concrete is a thermal
It's
bridge.
colder.
It sucks heat out of your house and dumps it into the frozen ground. Scandinavian cabins stood on stone piers that lifted the wood off the dirt. This created an air gap
Oh,
that
sure.
acted as insulation. The floors were thick planks, often double layered with sawdust or moss packed in between.
Yeah,
This
you're not
broke
literally
the
on the
thermal
floor.
bridge. No heat bled into the earth. Every detail was designed to hoard heat.
You're
Why did we
enclosed.
stop building this way?
Yeah, it's
3
expensive.
reasons: speed, cost, and cheap oil.
Yeah.
After World War II, we needed millions of houses fast. Scribing logs and hand-cutting joints took too long.
Yeah, of course.
Stick framing with 2x4
You need to wait 100 years for the tree to grow.
plywood took weeks, not months. Labour was expensive, but materials needed to be cheap. Thin walls with batting were cheaper than solid timber. And then the energy boom. In the 50s and 60s, oil and gas were dirt cheap.
Oh, of course.
Who cared if a house was inefficient? You just
Yeah.
cranked the thermostat. We stopped building for resilience
It's
and
true.
started building for low upfront cost. We built houses that are on life support, dependent on a constant drip of electricity and gas.
But
Cut
it's
the wire,
cheaper.
and they die. But energy isn't cheap anymore. The grid is
Exactly.
becoming unstable. And people are realizing their expensive homes are fragile. In Europe, specifically Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, there is a massive movement back to solid wood construction, mass timber.
Oh,
It's not nostalgia, it's physics.
sure.
Architects are combining traditional log principles with modern tech. Thick cross-laminated timber, CLT, walls, masonry heaters, and smart compact layouts.
I like that.
They are seeing massive drops in energy use. A well-built solid wood home can run on 1/3 of the energy of a conventional build.
That's
And
amazing.
if the power goes out, it stays livable
It
for
stays warm.
days. Science backs this up. A 2018 study by the University of Innsbruck tracked solid wood houses versus conventional builds over 5 years. The wood homes use 40% less heating energy in winter. In summer, they didn't even need AC because the thermal mass buffered the heat. Residents reported fewer drafts and a healthier
Oh.
environment. Wood naturally regulates humidity,
Yeah, I'm wondering about the
absorbing
summer.
moisture when it's damp and releasing it when it's dry. No mold, no dry air, no noisy
No
humidifiers.
mold. What a dream.
And there is one more thing we rarely talk about: Durability. A
Oh,
modern
sure.
house starts dying the day it's finished. Vapor barriers rip, fiberglass settles, studs rot when water gets behind the siding. After 30 years, you're looking at major renovations.
Correct.
Scandinavian log cabins have stood for 600 years. As the wood settles in the first few years, the joints actually get tighter.
Ah,
A 50-year-old log home is often more efficient than a brand new one.
oh my
It's an
God.
asset that appreciates in function, whereas modern builds depreciate immediately. If you are
Absolutely.
looking to build or renovate a home today that is resilient, efficient, and built to last, steal these principles. You don't have to live in a medieval hut, but you can use thermal
Sure.
mass. Look into mass timber
The principle
or
is the
solid
same.
log construction. If you can't do solid wood walls, integrate stone mass inside. A masonry heater or a heavy stone fireplace surround can act as your thermal battery. Focus on air tightness, pay for a professional blower door test, and seal every leak. That is worth more than adding another layer of insulation. Design for compactness. Skip the cathedral ceilings if you care about efficiency. Lower
They're
ceilings
pretty.
and closable rooms keep the heat where you are. Use thermal zoning. Heat the living space. Let the bedrooms stay cool. And think long term. A
Yeah.
house that costs $50,000 more to build but saves you $100,000 in utilities and maintenance over 30 years
It pays
is the
it
smarter
pays
buy.
itself.
Modern codes obsess over R value and upfront cost. They completely ignore resilience and life cycle value. The Scandinavian farmer in his 14th century cabin wasn't primitive. He was a
No.
master of applied physics. He knew that heat needs mass. He knew air leakage is the enemy, not the cold itself.
That's
He knew
insane.
radiant heat beats forced air. And he knew that working with nature beats fighting it with a furnace.
That's true.
We traded that wisdom for speed and cheap fossil fuels. Now that energy is
You have to go
expensive
back.
and the weather is getting wilder, we are paying the tab. If you found this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe. We are digging up the buried knowledge that the modern construction industry would rather you forget. The medieval log cabin wasn't an accident. It was the result of centuries
Yeah.
of trial and error. The structures that failed the winters were abandoned. The ones that worked were copied. What
Correct.
remained was a system so robust it got families through minus 30-degree winters with zero electricity
And they're still
zero
standing.
gas. These people worked 12 hours a day, built nations, and raised families. They weren't weak. They were strong because their homes sheltered them instead of draining their bank accounts. The secret wasn't lost. It was just buried under
They
marketing
didn't have bank
and
accounts.
short-term thinking. Every time you build with thermal mass, seal your air leaks, and use radiant heat, you are bringing that wisdom back. Wisdom that kept people warm when the world was brutal. Wisdom that still works. Subscribe, and let's keep digging.
Literally. Yeah, this was amazing. I've never realized, because I know that cabins are really old and, Europe has very old places, but I never really actually thought of the fact that, no, the actual houses are pretty old. And I know that in cities, I think it's more common because you have these buildings all over Europe. And I mean Europe as in the whole, that means, the UK, in Germany, in Spain, in Austria, in whatever place. The buildings, I think, are pretty old. They tend to be pretty old. But I never actually thought of the fact that, of course, in Scandinavia, it's going to be the same. And because it's probably more rural, and I'm not talking about the actual cities, as in, obviously, because those Scandinavian cities and capitals, and the big capitals, of course, are built, they have big cities and they're built with bricks and whatever it is that they're built. But my point is, of course, that a lot of more people, I think, live in rural places. And I know in a nebulous sort of concept, yeah, sure, they live in cabins in the middle of the woods, and it's really nice, and that means, they live in a cabin in Finland, or they live in a cabin in Sweden. It's in Scandinavia, I don't know. Let's say Norway, but again, they live in these woods. But I never actually thought of the fact that a lot of those cabins are pretty old to begin with. And if they're not old, I think they're going to build it, but they're going to be using those techniques that I think probably by this point, we've been building like this for around 1,000 years, maybe a little bit less. But I think we perfected the art of closing the gaps and thermal what's it called, the thermal energy and restoring all of that. So I think it's great. I think it's because when I see it, oh my god, how come I've never really thought of this? Because I think you're so used to it, at least I know that I am used to the modern type of builds, which are everything's out of concrete, and you have this big slabs of cement and concrete and everything. I think it's colder, I think, to the touch. I can't explain it, but I just think that you're using more, I think, colder and metals and stuff, because that's just modern sort of well, of course you use drywall as well, but I think usually if we're not in the US, usually because the houses are literally made out of cardboard, which you can't really do that kind of thing, because like they mentioned, it's all in the weight of things. So one of the things about houses in the US is that they're so incredibly thin. Everything's super thin, so this does not apply. But I think when I think about some sort of sturdier builds, as in they use concrete, they use cement, they use other things, they're still, I think it's a little bit colder. They're not worried about I think insulating. Well, they use insulation, but they're not thinking about using their own materials or their own architecture, their all the engineering itself of this house in order to keep warm. I think that's really interesting, because I think because obviously back in the year 1800, they didn't really have and even though they kind of did with the moss and the hair, the animal hair, they were kind of thinking a little bit forward, as in we need some sort of insulation, we need to close the gaps and stuff. But it was not, I think, not a technical thing. Obviously now in this day and age, we know why we need to do those things. We have the science behind this. But I like that, no, they were doing this sort of, by instinct, because like they mentioned, it was trial and error. And they realized, well, if we do this, houses are trying, they keep warmer. They don't really need to keep a fire. Oh, the fire, it's going to, I think, you get more for your buck, basically. Obviously by I don't know how they were thinking about this back in those days, but that's the idea of it. But mostly I'm thinking about the fact that back in those days they were using what it was at their disposal, which I guess, again, primitive, era, whatever, 1800s, the medieval times, you kind of had to go with whatever was available to you. I mean, technically in this day and age, we kind of also have to do this. But I think it's more common to sort of be, oh, if I can't do this, I can buy it. I can maybe do some modification. If I really like, the vaulted ceilings, I can do something about this. Back in those days, it was all about, I think, practicality and more about using what you had and try to, well, this is what we have. Let's see what we can come up with what's available in our resources. I think, again, because I'm more than human, it's more about I think probably you're thinking, the sky's the limit. And if you don't like something, you can change it. Or if you like something very specifically, and I'm talking about, building houses, you can change it, you can replace it, you can always do things, later on. I think you're not thinking about, it's just what we have and that's it. And I think we're all sort of, like they mentioned, you're trying to work against nature in a way, because that thing about, oh yeah, to begin with, I don't think you care that much about, insulating and keeping a house warm, because you're thinking, whatever, I'll just put on the thermostat, or, I'll have a fireplace. But usually it's more about the thermostat. And you're not thinking actually about, oh no, but let's do this in an efficient way, as in let's use materials and let's use, a design that's going to keep us warm, or that's going to last throughout 50 years, 60 years, 30 years. No, you're not thinking, or usually I think the average person is not really thinking about this. It's more of, oh, who cares? Just, put it on the top, whatever. And I usually, and I think, again, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's usually, that tends to be the mindset. But if you actually think about this, like they mentioned, no, you're going to be saving a lot more money long term. And again, maybe earlier on, it's going to be more expensive and you're going to spend more building your house like this. However, if ultimately you're going to have a house that's going to be still standing, again, in 70 years, it's going to literally be your forever home. You're going to be staying. And because, again, if you're building a house, I'm thinking you want to live there for the rest of your life, and you can obviously remodel and stuff. But I'm thinking, if I'm actually building something, I want this to be forever. I don't want to sell this unless obviously something catastrophic happens, or I don't know. But it's usually you're building houses for you don't want to to get rid of the house in 20 years or in 10 years, because otherwise you would just flip it and that's it. But I'm talking about actual building processes. I don't know. I just think it's sort of, you have to measure, you have to balance the costs. And yes, you're not thinking about, oh, well, I would the rest of my life. Yeah, but you're going to keep, maybe, live it to your children or live it to family members. And maybe, and houses, I think modern houses, that's the thing, right? You have to constantly be repairing them. There's constantly something, there's something that has to be done. And unless it's a really, really, it's such a new house, it's less than, I don't know, 5 years. But usually houses, they tend to have a lot of maintenance. And maintenance, not just, the garden. No, as houses grow older, well, I guess similar to humans, I think, they kind of need more maintenance. They need repairs, they need more things. But again, if you want to, and maybe this is a little bit silly, but I think if you are sort of investing in your health, for instance, you're investing in your health while you're a little bit younger in order for you to have a better sort of life expectancy, or maybe to live a little bit longer, or to have a better quality of life. I think a house should be like that, right? And I think this is maybe a little bit of the same principle. And maybe it sounds a little bit silly, but I think that's really the case. I mean, you're investing in a house earlier on, that you're making it more efficient. So by, as years go by, you're going to be actually spending a less amount of money, whether that's, in your bills and in repairs, and is going to be sort of an asset that your family is going to have forever. So, if they, willing, if they want to, they're going to be able to have this, which I think sometimes that's not really the case, because I think houses are so, the maintenance so expensive, or they're just, again, like they mentioned, the humidity gets in. Once the water gets in, it rots everything, and it's all, it's a disaster. So, and the pipes, and well, they didn't really mention the pipes, so maybe that's a separate discussion. But yeah, again, ultimately, I think I like the idea of, you're investing a lot of money earlier on, but that's going to be better long term. And again, it's sort of as humans, which, okay, it's a really good piece of advice. But now what I want to do is now I want to buy a cabin. I want to buy a cabin, and I now know that if I ever built a house, I am most definitely going to be taking this into account, because I think you feel a little bit of a rejection. You're thinking, no, but I don't want to have, this medieval cabin. I want to live in a modern house. Yes, of course, because our modern sensibilities are probably not the same as, they used to be in the modern, on medieval times. But you can really take, like they mentioned, you can just take the techniques, and you can take the principles and just design this in a more modern way. You don't have to actually live in this old-timey cabin. I think you can do some things, and you can modify some things. Is it going to be the trendiest house ever? Probably not, because again, it goes, it's an anathema, I think, to the modern concept, the open floor concept, which I think is really what's trendy right now. Everyone wants an open house. The vaulted huge ceilings, they're gorgeous, yes. But I think, if you're looking for durability, if you're looking for efficiency, well, there are certain things that you're going to need to sacrifice, and that's one of them, sadly. But I think, now I feel very silly. How come I've never thought of this? And it's kind of wild to think about the whole, especially I think that when they were talking about the fireplace, it's not really a fireplace, it's this huge furnace made out of this huge, super heavy brick thing. But yeah, it's kind of crazy, because you're thinking for fireplace, or technically, there's a lot of types of fireplaces, but I always say that, technically, most of the times they're made out of bricks and stuff. And yes, of course, because the bricks are quite warm, and if you feel, again, the techniques and the science behind this is quite. I don't know, sort of how it's always been there. And maybe it's just me that I have never thought of this, but now I feel kind of like, oh my God, how could I have actually never realized this? Again, when you feel the fireplace, it's kind of warm, and it's not as in, oh no, it's so hot that I'm burning my hand. No, but I think it just keeps the house warm. And I think, that's really the science behind this. And come on, it's kind of, again, modern materials. Some people, that's in Spain, some regions, they live in these caves made out of stone. And I think maybe that's a little bit of the same principle. I guess they do it differently because, it's different types of climate. But again, they are it's the same, and they're these ancient houses. But I think it's the same principle, as in they have been using, as humans, we have to use what's available to us in whatever it is that we are. So I think that in recent years, since the 50s, I think that's really been lost, right? It's a lost art. it's a lost art form, and you go, no, whatever, just want this. And you want to do it cheaper, you want to do it faster, you want to do it in your way, instead of just let's try to adapt and sort of modify things. And let's use things to our advantage. If we live here, let's use what's available to us, and let's use those kind of things to our advantage, which I think is really what's been, we as humans and as a society, I think it's been on the decline, and we've been losing a little bit of that. But I like that, videos like this really show that it's possible, and definitely it opens your eyes to kind of, there's a whole other world out there, and we could definitely sort of replicate this, or at least try to replicate this to have, better, again, to be friendlier with the planet, I think, and just with ourselves in general. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!